Practical Patriots. It has been a while since I made a video. So I am going to start a new project. I am going to be reading the Federalist Papers one at a time on these videos. I had looked on YouTube recently and found that there was no good audio of the Federalist Papers. It was very boring. So I figure I am an interesting reader and everybody needs to read the Federalist Papers. So we're going to start that project. So today I am going to read the preface and the prefatory remarks. And then in the next episode, we will start with Federalist number 1. So for your listening pleasure, here is the preface from 1788 and the prefatory remarks from 1818. Preface. It is supposed that a collection of the papers which have made their appearance in the gazettes of this city under the title of Federalist may not be without effect in assisting the public judgment on the momentous question of the Constitution for the United States, now under the consideration of the people of America. A desire to throw full light upon so interesting a subject has led, in a great measure, unavoidably to a more copious discussion than was first intended. And the undertaking not yet being completed, it is judged advisable to divide the collection into 2 volumes, of which the ensuing numbers constitute the first. The second volume will follow as speedily as the editor can get it ready for publication. The particular circumstances under which these papers have been written have rendered it impracticable to avoid violations of method and repetitions of ideas, which cannot but displease a critical reader. The latter defect has been intentionally indulged in order the better to impress particular arguments which were the most material to the general scope of the reasoning. Respect for public opinion, not anxiety for the literary character of the performance, dictates this remark. The great wish is that it may promote the cause of truth and lead to a right judgment of the true interests of the community. New York, March 17th, 1788. Prefatory remarks, 1818. The present edition of the Federalist contains all the numbers of that work as revised by their authors, and it is the only one to which the remark will apply. Former editions, indeed, it is understood, had the advantage of a revisal from Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Jay. But the numbers written by Mr. Madison still remained in the state in which they originally issued from the press and contained many inaccuracies. The publisher of this volume has been so fortunate as to procure from Mr. Madison the copy of the work which that gentleman had preserved for himself, with corrections of the papers, of which he is the author, in his own hand. The publication of the Federalist, therefore, may be considered in this instance as perfect, and it is confidently presented to the public as a standard edition. Some altercation has occasionally taken place concerning the authorship of certain numbers of the Federalist. A few of those now ascertained have been written by Mr. Madison, having been claimed for Mr. Hamilton. It is difficult to perceive the propriety or utility of such an altercation, for whether we assign the disputed papers to the one or the other, they are all admitted to as genuine. And there will still remain to either of those gentlemen an unquestioned number sufficient to establish for him a solid reputation for wisdom and patriotism. It is not the extent of a man's writings, but the excellence of them that constitutes his claim upon the contemporaries and upon posterity for the character of the intellectual superiority. And to the reader, the difference in this case is nothing, since he will receive instruction from the perusal, Lathern have been written by whom they may. The present moment may be regarded as peculiarly favorable for the republication of this work. Mr. Hamilton is dead, and both Mr. Jay and Mr. Madison have retired from their busy scenes of life. The atmosphere of political passions through which their principles and actions were lately viewed has disappeared, and has been replaced by one more pure and tranquil. Their political virtues are now manifest and almost universally admitted. Time, which tests the truth of everything, has been just to their merits and converted the reproaches of party spirit into expressions of gratitude for the usefulness of their labors. It is to be hoped that neither a mistaken zeal of friendship for departed worth, nor an inclination to flatter living virtue, will induce anyone to disturb this growing sentiment of veneration. In this collection, the Act of Confederation and the Constitution of the United States also find an appropriate place. They are the text upon which the Federalist is a commentary. By comparing these two national constitutions and reflecting upon the results of each, the defects of the former and the perfections of the latter will be easily perceived. And the American people may thence be instructed that however prudence may dictate the necessity of caution in admitting innovations upon established institutions, yet that it is at all times advisable to listen with attention to the suggestions and propositions of temperate and experienced statesmen for the cure of political evils and the promotion of the general welfare. The Constitution of the United States has had, in the sunshine of peace and in the storm of war, a severe but impartial trial, and has amply fulfilled these expectations of its friends and completely dissipated the fears of its early opponents. It may, in truth, be asserted that the 10 first declaratory and restrictive amendatory clauses proposed at the session of Congress, which commenced on the 4th of March, 1789, and which were ratified by the legislatures of the states, fully satisfied the scruples of those who were inimical to that instrument as it was first adopted, and by whom the amendments were considered necessary as a safeguard for religious and civil liberty. Thus, and still further amended, the Constitution, as a great rule of political conduct, has guided the public authorities of the United States through the unprecedented political conduct, vicissitudes and the perilous revolutionary commotions which have agitated the human race for the last quarter of a century, to a condition at once so prosperous, so commanding, so happy, that it has wholly outstripped all previous foresight and calculation. When we look back upon the state of interests in which we reposed under the Act of the Confederation, to the languishment of our commerce, and the indifference with which, in that situation, we were regarded by foreign governments, and compare that disposition of things with the energy to which we were subsequently roused by the operation of the Constitution, with the vast theater on which, under the influence of its provisions, our maritime trade has been actively employed, with freedom and plenty which we enjoy at home, and the respect entertained for the American name abroad, and the alacrity with which our favor and friendship are sought by the nations of the earth, our thankfulness to Providence ought to know no bounds, and to the able men who framed and have supported the Constitution should only be limited by those paramount considerations which are indispensable to the perpetuation and increase of the blessings which have been already realized. The perspicuous brevity of the Constitution has left but little room for misinterpretation. But if at any time ardent or timid minds have exceeded or fallen short of its intentions, if the precision of human language has, in the formation of this instrument, been inadequate to the expression of the exact ideas meant to be conveyed by its framers, if the form of vehemence of party spirit, if it has been warped by individuals, so as to incline it either too much towards monarchy or towards an unmodified democracy, let us console ourselves with the reflection that however these aberrations may have transiently prevailed, the essential principles of the representative system of government have been well preserved by the clear-sighted common sense of the people, and that our affections all concentrate in one great object, which is the improvement and glory of our country. After deriving so many and such uncommon benefits from the Constitution, the notion of an eventual dissolution of this union must be held by every person of unimpaired intellect as entirely visionary. The state governments, divested of scarcely anything but national authority, have answered, or are competent to answer every purpose of amelioration within the boundaries of the territory which they are respectively restricted, whilst in times of difficulty and danger, acting directly upon an intimate knowledge of local resources and feeling, they are enabled to afford efficient aid to the exertions of the national government in the defense and the protection of the Republic. These truths are obvious. They have been demonstrated in times of domestic tranquility, of internal commotion, and of foreign hostility. In return, the advantages which the national government dispenses to the several states are keenly felt and highly relished. When the Constitution was ratified, Rhode Island and North Carolina, from honest but mistaken convictions, for a moment withheld their assent. But when Congress proceeded solemnly to act that the manufactures of those states should be considered as foreign, and that acts laying a duty on goods imported and tonnage should be extended to them, they hastened, with a discernment quickened by a sense of interest, and at the same time honorable to their patriotic views, to unite themselves to the Confederation. The only alteration of importance which the Constitution has undergone since its adoption is that which changes the mode of electing the president and vice president. It is believed that, all things being duly weighed, the alteration has been beneficial. If it enables a man to aim with more directness at the first office in the gift of the people, it equally tends to prevent the recurrence of an unpleasant contest for precedency between the partisans of any two individuals, in Congress, to which body the last resort or choice is referred. Besides, whether the Constitution should prescribe it or not, the people themselves would invariably designate the man they intended for chief magistrate, a reflection which may serve to convince us that the change in question is more in form than in fact. To conclude, the appearance of so perfect an edition of the Federalist as the present must be allowed to be, may regarded as the more fortunate, as the journal of the convention that framed the Constitution is about to be published, and a new light to be thus shed upon the composition of that instrument. The Act of the Confederation and the Constitution itself have been, by permission of Mr. Adams, the Secretary of State, carefully compared with the originals deposited in the office of that department, and their accuracy may therefore be relied on, even on the punctuation. City of Washington, May 1818. Thanks so much for listening. Be blessed and stay free. We'll see you next time with Federalist number 1.
Thanks for watching The Practical Patriot. Like and subscribe below.
That's right.